The investigation involving Trump's campaign and possible obstruction of justice or collusion with Russia is now focusing on Jeff Sessions and meetings that he did not disclose with Russian officials. Now, apparently during his confirmation hearing on January 10th, Sessions testified that he did not have any communications with the Russians during the campaign. In fact, we have that video for you right now. Here is Al Franken asking Jeff Sessions specifically about whether or not he had any contact or communication with Russians. Take a look.
And if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
Okay. Oops. Well, that's a little problematic because reports emerged in March that he did have 2 meetings with Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, during the campaign, one at the Republican National Convention in July and one in his office, his Senate office, in September. Well, now there are reports emerging indicating that he had an intimate meeting with Kislyak on a different date. So investigators are focusing on whether a meeting took place April 27th, 2016 at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C., where then candidate Donald Trump was delivering his first major foreign policy address. Prior to the speech, then Senator Sessions and Russian Ambassador Sergey Kislyak attended a small VIP reception with organizers, diplomats, and others. Now, that is all we know at the moment in regard to that event, right? They attended together. We don't know what type of communication they had during that meeting. We don't know if there was anything shady happening during that meeting, but it's important to keep in mind that Sessions is now, I guess, a larger part of this investigation than previously thought. Also keep in mind that it seems as though the White House is taking extra measures to protect itself, and everything they do makes them look even more guilty. For instance, Sean Spicer claims that he is no longer answering any questions involving Russia. Take a look, video 7.
CNN is reporting that James Comey will testify that the president pressured him to drop the Michael Flynn investigation. Did the president engage in obstruction of justice in repeated meetings with James Comey?
Our job, we are focused on the president's agenda, and all going forward, all questions on these matters will be referred to outside counsel Mark Kasowitz.
So the outside counsel part of that statement is very important because not only will there be private counsel, there's also White House counsel, and they're likely to butt heads. And I'll get to the details of that in just a second, but I know Cenk wants to jump in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so on Sessions, I knew that he had more meetings with the Russians as soon as they asked him on March 2nd, after he admitted to the 2 meetings. He said when they asked him, "Did you have any more?" He said, "I don't believe so. You know, we meet a lot of people. I don't believe so." I was like, yeah, okay, he had more meetings with the Russians. It's just a matter of time before we find out, and it looks like now we found out. Whether they were intimate at the Mayflower Hotel is a different question. I suspect that we'll find out more about that. And the reason that Sessions is the Attorney General now might have a lot to do with those exact meetings. So there's a lot of show about who Donald Trump might pick for all these different positions. Well, now, is it going to be Mitt Romney or Rudy Giuliani for Secretary of State, Attorney General, et cetera? And then look at the people that he wound up picking. Sessions is the guy who is the top law enforcement officer, as the Attorney General, who had apparently now many meetings with the Russians that he lied about on the record. That's what they impeached Bill Clinton for. So Republicans who were outraged at Bill Clinton, how dare you lie on the record well, that Sessions has now admitted that he lied about that, right? So no repercussions at all, and he's our top law enforcement officer. Anyway, Trump puts the guy who met with the Russians but was trying to hide it as the Attorney General. He puts Wilbur Ross as Commerce Secretary. What's Wilbur Ross? He ran the Bank of Cyprus, believed to be the epicenter for Russian money laundering. What a wild coincidence. Wait, we're not done with the coincidences. Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, has no experience in diplomacy at all. He was the CEO of ExxonMobil, who had a $500 billion deal with the Russians that were blocked by the sanctions put into place by Obama. So now, by the way, Trump just has begun to reverse some of the actions that Obama took against the Russians. And they had 2 houses filled with spies, and Obama kicked them out. Now, Trump is reopening those houses. So Russian spies, you're welcome back into the country. So all of these incredible coincidences, gee, I wonder what's happening. And if you're wondering why they met with the Russian ambassador on that day, so telling as to what happened the day before and the speech after. Day before, Donald Trump won 5 northeastern states, becoming the front runner to win the Republican primary. So all of a sudden the Russians are like, oh wait, we were just messing around, this guy's actually gonna win. They rush over to the Mayflower Hotel where he's gonna give a foreign policy speech. And after they talk to the Russians, Donald Trump gives a foreign policy speech where he says that we are not bound to be adversaries. We should seek common ground based on shared interests with the Russians. And I believe in easing of tensions and improved relations with Russia.
Right.
Isn't that interesting? So a lot of coincidences. And somehow Jeff Sessions seems a little nervous about those connections and wants to continue hiding them. If you didn't do anything wrong, why are you hiding it? I hear conservatives say that all the time.
That's right, that's right. And also, it's amazing the type of actions, pro-Russia actions they take as they're in the middle of this investigation. Like you mentioned, the compounds that they're going to approve, right? Of course, these Russian spies were kicked out of the country because they were spying on Americans or the American government. And now all of a sudden Trump's like, I don't know, let's let them back in, why not? So that's problematic, right? But also keep in mind that they're lawyering up. And that's why I mentioned the whole issue of the private counsel and how the private counsel is likely to conflict with the best interests of the White House counsel. So I think Adam Goldberg, who is a former White House special associate counsel, puts it perfectly. Let me give you his statement. He says the outside counsel's job is to make sure the president doesn't get indicted, and if he does, that he doesn't go to jail. The job is defending him personally. When it comes to the White House counsel, though, things are a little different. The White House counsel's job is to worry about the institution of the presidency. They're going to give advice that is best for that office, not necessarily the man.
So that's why Trump can't just rely on his White House counsel anymore, because that guy's job is to protect the White House. So he needed a lawyer to protect his own ass. And so that's why Trump said, no, I need my own lawyer. Now, I'm also told by the right wing that the cops are always right. And what do the cops always tell you? What do you need a lawyer for if you didn't do it? I don't know, I'm just asking. I mean, those are the positions the right wing has, right? So, but from now on, Sean Spicer will not answer any questions about Russia because it might implicate the president, so you're gonna have to talk to his personal attorney about that. What do you get for Young Turks membership? It's a mystery. Only one way to find out. TYTnetwork.com/join.